Summary. There is an island near Italy where being quirkless is the norm. Some people come as tourists enjoying the sun and beaches. Some people, like a certain Midoriya Inko, fresh from a devastating doctor's visit for her son, come to escape a society ruled by quirks. Izuku thrives, and while his dreams turn away from heroes, he hopes to one day become part of the soldiers who guard and protect the island's citizens, despite the fact that having a quirk is almost a prerequisite for the job. That doesn't stop him from trying, however. Hard work pays off in the end. Records are scrubbed and corrected, and Il Soleil fills a spot that had previously been blank all his life. Chapter 1. For Happiness. Inko stepped off the airplane with a stumble. After hours of sitting in an uncomfortable plane seat, it was a relief to finally stretch her legs, even if she would have liked to do it at a slower pace and without the heavy bags she carried. Izuku stumbled beside her, latching onto her pant leg to make sure neither of them got lost. She wished he had gotten more sleep on the plane. The airport they stepped into was full of chatter, smatterings of what must have been dozens of other languages, but she only recognized English, Japanese, and Italian. Inko would have loved to take in the sights and marvel, but their traveling wasn't over yet, not to mention she was determined to get her and her baby boy some proper food. They stopped to eat an oddly timed dinner, her sense of time shot after the long flight and change in time zones. Burger, fries, and chicken nuggets definitely hadn't been what Inko imagined when she dreamed about what her first meal in Italy would be like. But because she had a small child with her, it was a safe food she knew he would be happy to eat. She was happy to know that Izuku was glad to be eating something other than airplane food. Sitting at a table in a half-restaurant in part of the airport, dozens and hundreds of people passed by while they ate. Quirks of all kinds were on show, from mutant types to casual quirk use, and Inko saw expressions of quirks she had never seen before. It was almost surreal to think about how this scene wouldn't be found anywhere at their destination. This was one of her last glimpses at a quirk-dominated society, but Inko felt like she couldn't completely wrap her head around that fact. In the liminal space of the airport, everything blurred together. Izuku was at that age where all he thought about was All Might and what his quirk could be when it came in. Or he would have been if not for that doctor's visit a month ago, when the doctor told them in no uncertain terms that Izuku would never develop a quirk. He cried that night, watching his favorite All Might video clip, and Inko cried as well, apologizing as much as she possibly could. It didn't feel like enough, of course, and she felt like crying again when she spotted him the next morning trying to breathe fire like his father could. Inko took Izuku to the Bakugo house the next day, secure in the knowledge that Masaru would be able to watch over Izuku with little trouble, even with Mitsuki and Katsuki away on vacation halfway around the world, while she went to work. She went through the motions at her job as a nursing assistant, not quite there, not quite stable in reality as before. She couldn't compartmentalize when all she could think about was her child's sadness. Inko barely paid attention to the patient the doctor was examining, Akancho Dante, a man with a thick accent who had acute migraines. Her hand moved mechanically as she wrote information down on her clipboard. He was a foreigner with no handy local records, so there was a lot to fill out. She barely noticed dropping her pen until it clattered on the floor, jolting her from her not-quite-there stupor. "Sorry," she apologized, using her quirk to pull the pen back to her hand without having to bend down. "I'm just so clumsy today." The man, Dante, stared at the pen in her hand, and just when she started to worry something was wrong, he burst into hearty laughter, making her jump. Sorry, he apologized as well. "Where I'm from, quirks aren't all that common. I always think it's amazing to see quirks used so casually when I travel to places like Japan." An idea sparked in Inko's mind. "Where are you from, if you don't mind me asking?" "A little island called Regalo," Dante answered with a smile. "It's off the coast of Italy. Beautiful place. It has a very high quirkless population, and few have visible quirks." "Are you quirkless, Mr. Akancho?" Inko asked. "I have a quirk, actually. It's a mental one, and I have a license to use it on a Regalo." "Mr. Akancho," the doctor interrupted, "have you considered that your migraines lately could be from quirk overuse?" "Now that you mention it," he considered, stroking his goatee in thought, "I have been using it more often these past few days." The doctor nodded. "Try to give it a rest for a few days, and there's a prescription I can give you for a headache drug tailored for those with mental emitter quirks. The doctor and Dante continued talking, but Inko's mind was elsewhere, already making travel plans. After she picked up Izuku and returned home that day, Inko moved quickly. Too fast for her anxiety to come in and ruin everything before she could rent a place and buy the plane tickets. In short order, everything was set in stone. She might have been internally screaming as she sold and donated what she could, packed up the apartment and called all her associates and friends to tell them about her plans to move halfway across the globe, but she somehow managed it all, even when her anxiety and friends saying she couldn't do it. But she knew she had to if she wanted her little ball of sunshine to be happy. Izuku didn't need a quirk and didn't need to think about quirks when nobody around him had a quirk. Mitsuki and Katsuki returned from their trip just days before Inko and Izuku were due to leave, and the mothers gave their boys time to talk and play for the last time. They were quiet, somber as they played with Katsuki's All Might collection. She kept glancing at them, hoping they wouldn't talk about quirks. She saw how kids acted these days, in a world where quirks became so important to a kid's forming identity. If they brought up quirks and Izuku said he didn't have one, she was sure that would sour their last days together. But to her relief, the topic of quirks didn't come up. Katsuki was more enamored with telling stories about his month in America, all the heroes he saw there, and she muffled a laugh when he bragged about getting a professional mani-pedi and full spa experience. Inko's and Mitsuki's conversation was much quieter, and with frequent, soft glances to their kids. "You'll write to me, won't you, Inko?" Mitsuki asked. "International calls will be expensive, but we can still email." "I'm not sure what the internet is like on Regalo," Inko admitted, a warm cup of tea in her hands. "But there's always snail mail." Mitsuki grinned. "That could be fun. But try to call me as soon as you get to your new place, okay? As soon as possible. I gotta watch out for my best friend and make sure she's safe." Inko smiled, trying to reassure her. "I'm sure I'll be fine. I'm just a little nervous. Last time I traveled outside of Japan, Hisashi was there. But it'll just be me and my little sunshine this time." "Hey, forget about that bastard," Mitsuki insisted, scooting closer. "As long as he's just paying child support, you don't need to even think about him. And hey, maybe you'll even find some cute faces in Italy to keep you company." Inko blushed. "Let's not talk about that. I'm still struggling to learn Italian." She still barely knew Italian, sitting in that half-restaurant in a large, daunting airport in a new, daunting country, and it now felt all so real. She was really doing this, uprooting her whole life and making a new one. All to see Izuku smile. "It'll be just like our home in Japan, Izuku," she told her son, daydreaming as she stared at all the posters and advertisements on the wall that so many other travelers walked by. "We'll be able to walk to the beach every day, and we'll have a little home to ourselves. Are you excited to meet your neighbors, Izuku? I think you'll make a lot of friends at your new school." "Do you think All Might's ever been to Italy?" Izuku asked, skipping around the questions. He probably still had Katsuki on his mind, having said his final goodbyes at an early hour in Japan before they went through airport security. All he had ever really known in his 5 years of life was preschool and running after Katsuki. The shifting tides of life were still a mystery to him. Inko chuckled. "We'll have to look that up later, but I bet he has. Maybe he's even been to Regalo." "Regalo?" He asked around a mouthful of food. "That's where we're going, Izuku. Our new home." "It's okay, Mom. We're off the boat now. Why is everything still swaying?" The ferry from mainland Italy to the island of Regalo came with a few brochures on the laws and culture of Regalo, one version thankfully in Japanese, but Inko hadn't read any of it. Her first trip on a boat, and she very quickly discovered that she and boats did not go well together. Inko was still feeling the seasickness as she sat down on a bolted-down bench on the dock. Izuku, helpful and lovely child that he was, made sure their luggage didn't fall over. He ran in circles around the bench, looking at everything with wide eyes and gaping mouth, and Inko closed her eyes with a groan. Too much visual movement for her at the moment. "First time on a boat?" Inko looked up, realizing the question had been asked in Japanese. A red-haired man in a white coat smiled back at her. "It definitely gets easier the more time you spend on boats, but I have a feeling you don't want to go near them anytime soon," he continued. "I heard you speaking Japanese, so I thought I'd welcome you to the island." Inko managed a weak smile. "Well, I've been learning Italian, but I'm thankful to hear we won't be alone here in speaking Japanese. My son and I are actually moving here. Oh, sorry. She stood up and carefully bowed. My name is Midoriya Inko, and this is my son, Izuku. Izuku returned to her side, his eyes and gaping mouth wide as he took in the large bearded man talking to them. It's a pleasure to meet you, he said with a responding bow. Just call me Mondo. Izuku closed his mouth, then opened it again to ask, Are you a hero like All Might? Mondo laughed, while Inko blushed and tried to excuse her son. Sorry about him, he's a little obsessed with All Might. It's no problem, Mondo assured her, nothing but amusement in his eyes. I guess you could say I'm the All Might of Regalo, but my strength isn't boosted by a quirk or anything. These are homegrown muscles. Inko glanced down at Izuku with worry, but her son stared up at the man with a widening smile, calming her nerves. I heard that Regalo doesn't have very many individuals with quirks. She tentatively ventured, hoping she didn't sound like an ignorant tourist. Is that true? It's a fact that tourists are always surprised by, Mondo confirmed with a nod. Izuku inched closer to him, and he knelt down to ruffle her son's hair, grinning when he squeaked in surprise. I hope you two abide by the laws we have here and keep your quirks to the household. Public quirk use, even if it's harmless, can get you in trouble here. Only those licensed by the Akana family are allowed to use their quirks so openly. It's how we keep the peace. Inko nodded. I don't think we'll have that problem. She smiled sadly down at Izuku, who was still enamored with the large man. Do you have the address of where you're moving in? Let me walk you there, Mondo offered, standing back up. I don't know, Inko hesitated, understandably nervous at the idea of walking with a man she had only just met in a place she didn't know. But Izuku made the decision for her, tugging on her pants leg. Can we go with Mondo, Mom? He's just like All Might, Izuku insisted, and she could practically see his eyes sparkling as he bounced with excitement. He'll keep us safe. Mondo laughed. Of course I'll keep you and your mom safe. And maybe some other time you'll do me the pleasure of coming and having dinner with me. Oh, no. No, she didn't want to be hit on as soon as she stepped off the boat. What kind of person did this man think she was? And my wife once you're settled in? Inko blinked. She says yes. Izuku, she gasped. Izuku got on his tiptoes to whisper loudly at her. But he's the All Might of the island. He even said so. Inko sighed and looked back at Mondo. I guess if it's not too much trouble for you, she started, but he cut her off. It's what I do around here, helping out people and making sure everyone's smiling, he assured her, and he gestured to their luggage. May I? Inko nodded, and soon enough, the luggage Inko had brought with her all the way from Japan was split between the two of them, Izuku running along with his yellow backpack bouncing on his back. As they walked, Inko noticed multiple people calling out with waves and smiles to Mondo, to which he responded with a wave and a shout of something in Italian. It feels like this town has a strong community, Inko commented, watching everyone walk through the streets, smiles and kind chatter going on all around. In an isolated place like Regalo, where the only way on and off the island was by boat, she figured a strong community had to have been built out of that. It made her feel like an outsider. It does. Mondo picked Izuku up at some point, giving him a higher viewpoint to see the town from his shoulders, his wide eyes soaking in all the features of the quirkless town. It wasn't always like this, but I've worked hard to protect this island and make it a place people can be happy to call home. Like a hero, Izuku cheered. Inko blinked, one part of that sticking out to her. You? Mondo smiled. I'm Mondo, head of the Akana Familia. Inko frowned. Akana Familia? She repeated, the name not ringing any bells. Mondo laughed. Rare that someone comes to the island without knowing our name. We're the government of Regalo, in charge of police, tourism, foreign affairs, economy, and the like. I've put a lot of work into it. I see, Inko realized, before her eyes widened in mortification. Oh wait, oh no, I've been talking to an important governmental figure this whole time and I didn't realize. Please don't worry, Mondo said with a sheepish struggle. I'd like if you just talked to me like a normal person, which actually is exactly what I am. Being in some position of power doesn't make me any different or special from anyone else. A normal person. Inko felt dizzy, and it might have been from the sudden panic or the culture shock, but her grip on her suitcase grounded her at that moment. It almost felt weird that she didn't know this person by his quirk, and neither did he know hers. It made her feel like they were both holding secrets. Izuku, quirkless, held no such secrets. We're here, Mondo said, jolting her from her thoughts. The new home was small. It was a place on the side of the cobblestone streets, squished between two other places, but it looked sturdy with thick rock walls and a bit of a slanted style that gave it charm. The photos online had made it seem cozy, and as they entered, Inko could see herself settling in and Izuku growing up in this small place. She wasn't the shortest woman ever, but she knew she was small and would adjust fine to the space. Her mind wandered to Izuku, however, wondering how tall he would grow and if he would find this place stifling as he grew older. Mondo stepped in just fine despite his All Might-esque physique, washing away her worries. She was just overthinking, that was all. The kind, jovial man brought their luggage into their new front room, talking about the nearby outdoor market as he did so. When he left, Inko heaved a great sigh and sat down. For a moment, the room languished into peace, but just for a moment. He's not as big or as powerful as All Might, but he's still an amazing hero. Mondo said his muscles weren't from a quirk. When I'm big, I want to grow muscles just like him. Izuku rambled on, bouncing his yellow backpack on his back as he poked around the new home, taking in as much as his little heart could. She wondered what it would be like in a few years, a rising bilingual child by then, chattering on in Italian about whatever interested him next. She wondered if it would feel as homely as his familiar Japanese. It would still be Izuku, though, she reflected with a soft smile. And that was what made it home, right? Yes, Izuku, she answered. He's big, isn't he? Once we get your schooling sorted, we'll think about buying weights for you, and you can train with those, okay? Izuku cheered, and she wearily watched him race up the stairs. It had been a long day, and the days and months ahead had promised a rough adjustment period. A new home. Inko had left friends and family in Japan, and while she would have to navigate this new life by herself, at least she wouldn't be completely alone. Izuku was happy, and that was what mattered. That was why she had traveled so far, to make sure he grew up happy. End of Chapter 1.